McAleese strapped on two lavalier microphones. I don't know. All right, I don't know how to pronounce that, but apparently it's a backup in case I drop one. Hey, thanks for the opportunity to tell you about missile defense today. I have a few charts that we're going to strum up real quick, or get them up on the wall, and I'll walk you through them real quick, and then happy to take questions. All right, and there they are. We can flip charts. Next chart. Okay, there you go. So this is a look forward and look back kind of chart. I briefed a version of this last year at the Space and Missile Defense Conference. What it shows you is a threat that we were facing 20 years ago was roughly a predictable ballistic track. Pretty lethal stuff, lots of countermeasures up in space, high speeds as they come down into the Earth, right? So really tough challenge, and that was really the reason the Missile Defense Agency was established, was to take on that threat on the left. If you look to the right, if you can read the chart at all, it's kind of changed. It went from going after very specific parts of the western United States into the total continental United States, particularly the rogue nations of North Korea and potentially Iran in the future. You can kind of see that it's changed from just a regional piece to all the way to going after ships and armies and logistics, going after our mobile forces with ballistic missiles. That's a tough world to live in. The missiles were ballistic, now they're the maneuvering, ballistic and maneuvering missiles. We have originally short and intercontinental, now to fully long-range missiles that can threaten the East Coast coming from the Pacific. Countermeasures used to be pretty simple, now they're very complex. And I'm talking about RV countermeasures, balloons, and the IR and the RF regimes, all done to confuse the overall sensor architecture, and then raise sizes have become incredibly large. So if you want to make it hard, this is how you do it, right? And kind of looking at the different trajectories, whether they're depressed or if they're lofted, and you've seen a lot of that in the news. This is real world kind of stuff, and it's happening as we speak. All right, the next chart, please. Next chart, there it is. So I think you've seen my placemat before, kind of two ways to look at it. I think of the world when I want to simplify it, probably oversimplify, by talking about detect, control, engage. So I'll always talk about sensors, and then I'll talk about the fire control systems. If fire control scares you, I'll say weapons quality data, and then I get down to the firing units. Whether that's the ground-based interceptor fleet up in Alaska, or if that's a ship forward deployed in the Sea of Japan, or if it's a THAAD sitting on Guam, or the Patriot batteries that are in the area to take on the cruise missiles in the shorter ranges. That's kind of the tiering structure in terms of detect, control, engage. Then if you move from right to left, that homeland mission that I kind of dropped anchor on initially is to the left and going down, right? So a pretty large sensor architecture to deal with those threats that are up in space. Generally, when you think of ballistic missiles, they are space-bound, right? They go up into space and they travel long distances, and then they come on back down into the atmosphere. And that's the ground-based interceptor with its ground-based fire control, controlled out of Colorado. If you move to the right, it's the regional issue that we worry about. That's our forward deployed forces. That's ships, that's Army maneuver forces, those are air bases that are out forward, and we have to protect those too. Generally what we will use is we'll start with the self-defense systems that are off to the right, and we build those out and we improve on those so that the maneuver forces can use those in the regional fight. So I kind of look at the world through those different lenses, and I'll take you to where our focus areas are this year. Next chart, please. So kind of a hard to read chart, but what ties it all together for us, and I didn't emphasize on the last chart, is command control, battle management, and communications. That's that little sphere up there. 18 time zones, hardened networks, dual redundancy, cyber protected. And we did that for a reason. When we stood up the ground-based mid-course defense program, it was about sensors forward, right? So the way a ballistic missile attack goes is that we will detect them from space first. That's indications and warning. Then they'll pass through the field of view of a radar. Radars will establish track, and then we have to do something we call discrimination. And discrimination is picking out the lethal object in the complex. So when you think about a missile, it can be pretty dirty. You'll have booster separations, you'll have solid rocket fuel, you'll have V-bands from where the booster was connected to another stage, you'll have separation debris, and then you'll have the other countermeasures. Radars love that. They will kitty soccer on everything up there, right? So we have to go through the discrimination process to pick out the lethal object, so when we fire the missile, we're shooting at the lethal object, not at something else. And there's a lot of something else's up there for a normal fight. Across the middle there is really the #1 priority for the agency. I mentioned the ground-based mid-course defense program. And what you see in the little inset there is we're going through two things right now. One is you have an existing fleet today that defends the country against the rogue nation attacks. We are doing a service life extension program, which breathes life back into that capability so they can extend into the 2030s, while we also work on the next generation interceptor. And the next generation interceptor is under competition right now to deal with the threats. So, can you, okay, all right. And then at the bottom, you see the Aegis ships and you see the Aegis ashore sites. This is where we take the same sort of high-end technology and package that up to go after the regional threats. This is also the capability that will contribute to the defense of Guam and then also contribute to the glide phase intercept to take on hypersonics. As I've mentioned a few times to some folks, we are not sitting at zero when it comes to defending against the hypersonic threat, right? We can take today's sensor information from space, on the ground, and at sea. We can fuse that and we can get it to a ship to protect the aircraft carrier that's going forward with something called the Sea-Based Terminal Missile. And that is leveraging the Navy's SM-6 down in the atmosphere. That's a hard game. When you're down in the atmosphere, things do not get easy. I've heard people say that countermeasures strip off, so things are going to be easy down in the atmosphere. That's where you have high maneuvers. That's where jammers are being released. That's where you have a very wild electronic emissions environment. That is the toughest environment to engage, which is why we're developing the glide phase interceptor so we can have wide area defense against hypersonics to protect the sea base. And then finally, off to the right is our THAAD and Patriot capability. We integrated those over the last 3 years. We can now control Patriot missiles in flight from the THAAD fire control. And why does that matter? We have a longer set of eyes with the TPY-2 radars that are associated with the THAAD batteries and allows us to shoot the right missile at the right targets. Okay. All right, next chart, please. And this is the mission. I'll just reemphasize, layered defense is really important. That's defense in depth for those of you that have an air defense background. It is about protecting the United States. That is mission 1 for the Missile Defense Agency. And then the 4 deployed forces, our friends and allies and partners, that is the regional fight. And then finally, all phases of flight. We want to challenge the threat from boost to ascent, up in mid-course, and as it's coming back down and into the atmosphere. So, okay, that's my talk for today, and ready to take some questions.